Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish Prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
And welcome back, folks, to Through a Scottish Prism. It's been a week since we last spoke in our regular programme, and so it's nice to have you all back. I hope yours are well. Been a heck of a week. For anyone 70 years old or younger, it's a really special week. We are the monarch, Elizabeth, Queen of Scots, also known as Elizabeth II of England, after 70 years on the throne, has passed away and is replaced by her son Charles as the new king. And we will be discussing that and how it affects Scotland and how it affects probably the Commonwealth and the whole world, because it is the changing of a guard. It is a changing of the era. Things will never be the same again. That is for certain. But we should discuss how it affects how we think it may affect Scotland and how it's being handled throughout the nation. I am joined today by three of our regulars. One of them, Yvonne Ridley, whose daughter's been married today, and we wish them all the best. Cannot make it. She'd hoped to do the show today, but the connection in her hotel room is just not usable, so she can't join us this week. She'll be back next week. But I am joined from Clackmannanshire with Eva Comrie, my good friend. Eva, how are you?
Hi, morning, Roddy. Going great guns here, but you'll see from my view that I'm not in Clackmannanshire today. I'm joining you from just outside the great city of Dundee, and I'm on the beach at Broughty Ferry.
Oh, that's lovely.
It's looking good here.
You weren't evicted, were you? You're not living in the caravan now, are you?
We're living in the motorhome for the weekend, having originally planned to do some events, which last night would have been a wee Alba book event in Dundee, which was postponed as a mark of respect for the unfortunate, untimely death of the monarch. But there will be other events which will be continuing.
Good. I'm also joined by another my good old friend there. He's been in Myanmar, he's been in Korea, and now he's in exotic downtown Coatbridge. It's the Coatbridge Cavalier. Phil Boswell, welcome back, Phil. We missed you last week.
Not a
lot, but we missed you.
Well, I noticed they were as what do you expect when you get this trio of beauties on? Brilliant, absolutely brilliant they were. But no, just to step up with Eva's claim about Broughty Ferry, I'm in the famous Côte de Bridge, twinned with the Côte d'Azur for obvious reasons. The sun's shining and it's absolutely glorious. Yeah, come on.
Welcome back for a lovely. And third, I'm going to give you a wee clue for our next guest, who's joining us from the great city of Glasgow. Techie, stick up that wee clue for the viewers.
Hi, Charlie Craig, where the Proclaimers were urging everybody to get along to Yestival in George Square on the 18th of September and encourage and move us forward in our fight for independence.
Proclaimers, folks, it is, of course, our Tommy Sheridan. Tommy, my friend, how are you?
Roddy, I'm absolutely great, mate. And, because I've been promoting the event, I've been playing that video over and over and sending it to people. And I can watch it over and over. I just think it's brilliant. I mean, how good are the Proclaimers? You know, they're just legendary, absolutely legendary in musical terms, but also in their commitment to independence. They came out with a quote the other day. You've probably seen it. It's been well trailed, making the point that they would gladly give up their fame, their fortune, everything in relation to their musical achievements for independence, for the idea of Scotland being free once again. And I want to give you a wee exclusive for the show, because obviously it's important that Scottish Prism are supporting or sponsoring the event, as are over 50 organisations, mostly local yes groups, but other independence campaigns. So there's a real breadth to this festival next week in Glasgow. But the guys couldn't make it personally, but they have donated £2,000 to the costs of the event. And the event costs $4,100 to put on, in terms of the getting the stage properly built, getting the PA system, getting all the security fencing, all the licenses, all that type of stuff. But these guys have come up and give us over half of the cost with just one donation. Absolutely, that's called putting your money where your mouth is, Roddy. And I just love the guys. I love them a bit.
I think we all do. So, you know, the fame. I wish I had some fame and fortune to trade in, but alas, we don't. But Tommy, could you just clarify for everybody that we are going ahead next week?
Roddy, can I say categorically, we have got no plans whatsoever to postpone this event. This event goes ahead on the 18th of September in George Square. All of the relevant permissions have already been granted. The licence is there, the public liability insurance is there, and we now have the official government guidance, and it's clear, it's black and white. There is no obligation for any public event to be postponed during what is a very long mourning period. Let's be clear about this. I'm going to make a prediction, for instance. I'm going to make a prediction that the football that has been cancelled this weekend will not be cancelled next weekend. I mean, you know, there you go. Bold prediction. I may be proved wrong, but I don't think I will be. So the point I'm making is we are having an event next weekend. For goodness sakes, that's a long enough period for life to go on. People are sensitive about making comments about issues that we're going to discuss in a moment, Roddy, and I can understand the sensitivities. But life goes on, and as far as we're concerned, the struggle for independence is more urgent now than it has ever been in any of our lives, more urgent and more necessary. So the idea that this event would be postponed is ridiculous. Well, there's no way that we're postponing this event. We're going ahead, and we're asking all of the independence family to join together in George Square next Sunday and say loud and clear, we demand the right to vote. The Scottish Government's already named the date, for goodness sakes. If the Scottish Government's named the date, the no-one-elected judge and no-one-representative Tory should have the right to interfere. And the final point I made on this, Roddy, is by way of introduction. Think about this for a moment, please, the people of Scotland. Think about this. There's a woman where less than 0.1% of the population have voted for her, and she's going to turn around and tell the whole of Scotland, no, you can't have another vote. Get lost. Get lost. Come on. Show a wee bit of cojones. Get along to George Square next Sunday.
Correct, you're right. Just to, it was. She's actually. I was going to mention that later, but Liz Truss got 0.03% of the entire population, and of course, remember, this is the woman that wants us to get 50 or 60% independence, but she got 0.03. And the other one is, ask the football your predictions right, because the Rangers game in the Champions League is going ahead on Tuesday. Whether I'm happy about that or not, I don't know. I mean, it's going ahead on Tuesday anyway. But hey, you never know. You've got to be in it to win it. So anyway, here we are. It's been a week full, as I said in my introduction. If you're 70 years or younger, we've always had Elizabeth, Queen of Scots. Now she's gone. And things will never be the same again, will they?
Well, yes and no. I mean, obviously, Roddy, I am a Republican as well, and there's no doubt this is a sad event. A human being has died, a mother, a family member, etc. But what's annoying me is we're getting this forced down our throat a wee bit. This has been heavily politicised, and will be for the foreseeable future. But and you're looking at the Commonwealth, which was already moving towards Indy, will now doubtless accelerate. I mean, I prefer a republic, okay, but I had no issue of retaining the Queen as a normal head of state, if as a nominal head of state, if that was a way to get around independence. But what I did and still strongly object to is paying these billionaires for the pleasure of lording over us. I really do, and you can see this. I mean, more people are going to accelerate this in the Commonwealth. There's no doubt about it. You had the visitations to the Caribbean by some worthies, and they were handed wee notes of paper saying, "Oh, by the way, we're going to follow Barbados and we're going to go independent." That's normal. That's the natural progression of societies. But I want rid of these hangers-on. Last time I looked at the figures, it was about 330 million per annum that will subsidise all the extended royal family, and I don't even think that included the Lord Lieutenants and all that other assorted gimpery. But like I said, this is a human being who's died, and there can only be and should only be compassion. Yeah. But you also must speak the truth on this. I find that since I've arrived home in the early hours of Friday morning, every time someone turns on a radio, the television, or you see a paper, I mean, there's a 20-page spread in today's Herald politicising the Queen's love for Scotland.
Can I just interrupt you there, Phil? Talking of politicising, I don't know if you saw this clip. Techie, can you put up that clip from Channel 4 News, a national news broadcaster? And we're all, trying not to politicise it. This is them politicising.
Lest we forget the main influences of her life. Her mother from the great Strathmore clan, direct descendants right the way back to Robert the Bruce, her governess, Crawfie, her dresser, Bobo MacDonald, all Scots. She began the Second World War cloistered up there before she moved down to Windsor Castle. It was where Philip mooted the idea of their marriage. It was the best bit of their honeymoon spent there. This was the cradle of her private family life. I think it's deeply, deeply fitting. It actually feels so right. She died there. She was in the 19th, so we've kind of buried it because, of course, she's never allowed to be political. But in her Silver Jubilee commentary, she said she very much owned the fact she was the monarch of a united kingdom. She recognised there'd been kings and queens of Wales and of England, Scottish. And actually, she's the direct descendant of Mary, Queen of Scots, not of Edward VIII, the English Tudor, nor Elizabeth I, but shooting back up that line through the Stuarts all the way back to the Bruces. I think she'll, what a canny queen to die in Balmoral.
First thing I should just say before I bring you back in this, Phil, is I spoke to our resident historian, Roger Anderson, to get confirmation about this so-called line direct back. Utter nonsense was the phrase I got back. I'm more likely to be a direct descendant back to Nelson Mandela than she was back to Mary, Queen of Scots. I mean, the link is as tenuous as you can believe. But it is being politicised, and it is wrong. We would get criticised if we politicised it, but they're just going for it.
And they'll use it, and they'll cite common decency, and we should be reasonable about this. I really don't want to make political a game over it, but the surname before the war was Bax Coulpard Gotha. This is like there was a clip, I don't know if you remember, in Blackadder, and let's keep the Queen out of this, right? I'm talking about that woman who was on television lying and politicising this, okay? But there was a clip in Blackadder when he was getting interviewed, looking for a spy, and Darling was interviewed. I don't know if we get a chance to play that, we should. It was hilarious.
Look, I'm as British as Queen Victoria! So your father's German, you're half German, and you married a German? No, for God's sake, I'm not a German spy! Good, thanks very much. Send the next man.
But it was, but basically what it is, you've got the Balmoral, there's no tax paid there either. There's the love for Scotland, I don't question. I don't question that the royal family loved that, yeah, and that's fine. And who could blame them, And most welcome. Anybody's welcome in Scotland. We're a very welcoming country, but I just don't buy into this politicisation. They've lost a real serious card here. The Queen has been cited as the glue that kept a lot of the Commonwealth together, but without her, I mean, you look at some of the people in our family and the way they've been behaving and what the world thinks of it, we're going to see a continuous rise of a deconstruction of the Commonwealth. And I will shed no tears for that, I have to say. But I would urge people to check out Blackadder and the interview of Darling. When Darling said, I'm as English as Queen Victoria. And what Blackadder came back, what says you're half German, you married a German, and it's like absolutely brilliant. So no, that's a lie that woman said, that the royal family lineage goes back to the Stuarts. Through the
but there's also, Tommy, there's another one on BBC, we don't have that clip, is where the guy was saying about the energy crisis and everything and the austerity, which piles into significance now with the news that the Queen is very poorly. Here's the fact, the Queen lived to 96, and great. In your city, my city, our city of birth, Glasgow, the life expectancy of a woman is 78.3, 18 years less. Now, there's no coincidence between poverty and wealth and life expectancy. And that is something that we should highlight as a bigger concern than anything else.
Phil, Roddy, you've got to tell what Phil said there. He talks about honesty and integrity. And we, as individuals, if we lose our honesty and integrity, then we don't have anything else. That's all you have. I mean, everything else is fripperies, whether you've got a nice house, a nice car, whatever. If you lose your honesty and your integrity, then you've lost your very soul, as far as I'm concerned. And it is absolutely ridiculous, therefore, to try and force people to mourn, force people to feel a loss for someone who they knew nothing about, who they felt nothing for, and who means absolutely nothing to their lives. There are some people who are sad, and that's fine. It's a bit like religion, Roddy. Some people go to chapel or church every single Sunday because they get solace from it. They get reassurance from it. But you and I, and others, don't go to religious ceremonies. We're not going to slag people who do it. We're going to be sensitive to it. But don't force it down our throats. Don't tell us that we must mourn. I'm sorry, I don't mourn. Like Phil, I am a Republican, and I think it's wholly dishonest to, on Wednesday of this week, stand 100% for the abolition of the monarchy, for the removal of a horrible carbuncle of greed and unelected privilege in the British system, to stand for class war. Because that's what you're engaged in when you're involved in a trade union struggle. You're involved in class war. They're waging war on our class. They're taking wealth from our people. That's what class war is about. So you stand for all that on Wednesday, but then by Friday, you don't stand for it any longer. It's dishonest. It lacks integrity. Yes, we are compassionate. I'm a socialist. I'm a Republican, just like Phil. We're for life. We celebrate life. We want to save lives. We want to enhance lives. We want to improve lives. That's what makes you a bloody socialist. So, of course, there is compassion and there's sensitivity about someone passing away. But tell me this, at 96 years of age, where is the tragedy? There's no tragedy here. Tragedy is when young children pass away. Tragedy is when someone, a mother of 2 or 3 in the prime of her life, is killed in an accident. That's tragedy. There is no tragedy here. And for that BBC commentator, I saw the clip myself, Roddy. They were just about to talk about the energy price cap, which is absolutely crippling families that are already struggling with horrendous debt levels, are now facing a quadrupling of debts in relation to the basics of life, keeping your house warm and being able to cook for your wains. I mean, that's the basics of life. And they are suffering a quadrupling of the costs of doing those simple things in life. And this wee presenter says, well, such things pale into insignificance now that we have the the death of a 96-year-old woman who's lived in comfort all her life. Come on, how ridiculous was that expression? And I think we have to call out my final wee thing. I'm sure Eva wants to add this, but my final wee thing is this to the historians out there and to people who seriously want to document society. You know, I bet you there was the same rush to sanitise and sanctify the death of Winston Churchill. You know, oh, Churchill was wonderful, Churchill was this, Churchill was that. Look, he led us through the Second World War. People forget, by the way, he was that wonderful that people rejected him after the Second World War when they got a chance to vote. But genuine historians worked hard to expose the fact that in actual fact he was a murderer, he was a racist, he was someone who actually celebrated some of the brutality of colonialism and imperialism. And people had to be brave to say those types of things and to research those types of things. The future has to tell the truth about the royal family as an institution. And it is not that it's some peace-loving institution that's apple pie and custard. It's an institution that has supported colonialism, imperialism, war and brutality all across the world. It's an institution that we should have absolutely no truck with.
Eva, do you think the media's going over the top?
Yes, of course they are. We've had it rammed down our throats, and that's going to continue for goodness knows how long. However, the death of the Queen is naturally an event which I think it was Neil Hanvey described as being one of global significance. Of course it is, for lots of good as well as bad reasons. But we've got to get a sense of both perspective and reality. I said to you earlier, we're in Broughty Ferry, having been in Dundee yesterday, and travelling between Dundee and Broughty Ferry, we passed several unfortunate souls, if I want to put it that way, who appeared to be addicts, who were clearly very unwell and in very poor condition. And that's indicative of the poverty that there is in Dundee and the poverty that there is throughout Scotland. And so when I hear people praise the Queen as being the glue that kept the Union together, I don't actually think that that's praiseworthy at all. I think of Balmoral, and I remember that during COVID lockdown, Prince Charles brought COVID to Balmoral. That's how much they think of Scotland. It was the place they were going to run and hide and have a holiday in when the rest of us were terrified of what the future would hold. So I didn't notice the Queen opening Balmoral or any of the other houses that she owned or her institution or her family owned. She didn't open them and make them houses for the homeless during the pandemic. She didn't dig in deeply into her own pockets and pay overtime salaries for the nurses and the doctors that were literally rushed off their feet. There hasn't been any suggestion of any contribution from the royal family's funds towards the cost of this over-the-top pantomime that we're going to see unfold in the next couple of weeks. And whilst all of that's going on, knowing that there is in fact no magic money tree and there's no real money available for things like nationalising the energy companies, what we're going to see instead is millions and millions of pounds spent on a pantomime. I mean, what we've already got is, there was issued, I think it was yesterday, dicta on which roads are going to be closed and for how long, whilst the Queen's coffin travels from Balmoral down to, I think, Holyrood to begin with, and then from Holyrood to St Giles, and then from St Giles ultimately down to London. She could have been flown, but she's going to go by road instead. I think it's so that people line the streets and pay respects. All for what? It's a diversion, so that we don't speak about the real issues facing this country, which arise primarily from it being an imperial power. Still, to some extent, living very much in the past. And do they think we're all that daft that we're going to forget all the bad things that royalty is responsible for? Was it £12 million that she paid of basically our money to dig Prince Andrew out of the howk that he'd got himself into? There's plenty of other things that we could cite by way of examples of how royalty are not an example of how to live your life. We know that. We know about, I think, was it the Queen Mother's relatives who were unwell and mentally perhaps basically locked away for decades. We know all of this, but it's to be conveniently forgotten because wasn't Queen Elizabeth a nice old sort? Nobody knows if she was a nice old sort. She wasn't your pal. She wasn't your neighbour. She was somebody who lived a very hugely privileged life. And, there's much talk about how she fulfilled her duty. Well, it couldn't have been that difficult a duty to fulfil. I don't know if she ever cleaned the toilet. I don't know if she ever wiped up anybody's vomit. I'm not suggesting, I don't think for a minute she changed a nappy. How many times did she sit beside somebody on their deathbed and administer to them? Her life was entirely unimaginable for most of us. And so incredibly wealthy when, look around you, cap in hand, very apt introduction there for Tommy's video. The line in that song that you scream the loudest, get in line, son, there's 5 million waiting. That's exactly what we should be thinking every time you turn on the telly and you see a Union Jacks and thousands of people standing outside Buckingham Palace. Absolutely pathetic.
It was. And when Sir Keir Starmer saying she didn't reign over us, she lived among us, which is true. I mean, I used to see her in the Brig in Barhead on a Friday night, having a couple of halves and a wee pint of Guinness before she headed home. This kind of rhetorical bullshit is quite nauseating.
She wasn't standing in the checkout in Tesco's or Aldi's or Lidl's watching people embarrassed.
Watching what she was spending.
Aye. Not got enough money in their purse to pay for their messages and trying to choose what it is they're going to put back.
Yeah. And of course, Keir Starmer wasn't the only politician who reacted. There was 2 I'd like to highlight, and I've got you've got them there, Techie. The first one is the First Minister reacted to the monarch's passing, and she sent this message to she sent a message to the monarch saying that she'd and did her condolences, which was great, and she did us proud by doing it in the country, and she had to do it on behalf of the country. And then with the First Minister of Northern Ireland, Michelle O'Neill, doing the same. But they both greeted the new Prime Minister because that was the last act of our old monarch. She brought the new Prime, accepted the resignation of Boris, brought in Liz Truss, and we have a new Prime Minister this week as well. So it's a really unique week. Again, our First Minister sent a message to the new Prime Minister, as she had to the monarch. And here's what she said to Liz Truss. Congratulations on our political differences are deep. I will seek to build a good working relationship as I did with the last 3 Prime Ministers. Yeah. She hopes to work with these people who keep saying no to us, then you can't have a referendum and know your place, get to the back of the bus. And then Michelle O'Neill, her message to the new Prime Minister was, I demand that you sort out this mess with the DUP. I demand that you do something about the will of the people of Northern Ireland who have asked for a new government and have elected a Sinn Féin majority and want a Sinn Féin government. She's demanding. She's not asking to work with them. She's fighting for her nation and her beliefs and her politics. I know which one I prefer, Phil. And it's not that I would like to try and work with you.
Yeah, it's a hell of a contrast. It's leadership versus pathetic cap-in-hand pleading. Continuing with that theme. I mean, Nicola Sturgeon's Let's Work Together letter to Liz Truss. It's the same strategy she adopted with Cameron, May and Johnson. And how's that turn out? Same ineffective strategy. I mean, if you give her the benefit of doubt and say that her objective is independence, and you compare that with O'Neill, I mean, she's meeting the Americans using the Irish diaspora influence there to leverage pressure from the Brits' masters in Washington to respect and protect the Good Friday Agreement. What of our claim of right? Much stronger than even the GFA, you know. Then and she goes another step further. You're in a situation here. Truss appoints the European Research Group right-wing anti-Europe think tank guy, Christopher Heaton Harris, right? Right-wing militarist and anti-European. And again, it's like they're setting this up. They're setting this up, whereas the Britain's using all of its skills and sets, and Nicola's playing along with it. Whereas what you've got, the Irish and Sinn Féin have got it bang on the money. They're saying, we're not playing with you. We're not by your rules. Well, listen to all of the whinging that the SNP's been doing recently. Why are we still at Westminster? It's not working. Why are we still playing by their rules? It's not working. We should take a leaf out of Sinn Féin's book and practice abstentionism. We should get the hell out of there and certainly stop playing by their rules. And it's just such a terrible contrast. It's like, and it's the definition of madness to do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. This is not working, Nicola. Wait, I don't believe that. The problem here is that I don't give her the benefit of the doubt. I don't believe her objective is independence. Her objective is to get a cushy number for herself. That's what I genuinely believe. I'm sick of it now. There's just too much evidence to the contrary. If there's something else, if you want to do something about this, Nicola, do something about it. Shows it. Shows.
Quite a statement there.
I don't think it was true anyway.
On Tommy, on Phil's point there about Christopher Heaton Harris MP, he's a member of the ERG, and as such, he opposes the protocol and wants it removed. Now, the United States of America, from the Congress, I believe it was Nancy Pelosi, got in touch with Liz Truss as well. She sent a message and said, "Don't mess with Ireland. We're not going to accept it." I don't think we have worked the diaspora as much as the Irish, who have been absolutely brilliant at it. The Brits will mess with Northern Ireland at their peril, will they not?
Well, Roddy, the whole discussion is depressing, because what we're really talking here about is imperialism, isn't it? America should be listened to. Why? Because they're the bullies in the playground. They're the ones that can call the shots. They're the ones that control our nuclear weapon systems. They're the ones that run NATO. They're the ones that call the shots in Ukraine. And I'm repulsed by it, because I think America and American society is sick. I think it's utterly sick. It's the richest society on the face of the earth, and yet hundreds of millions don't have a basic health care. You've got tens of millions living in makeshift street shelters. It is a society which is rotten to the core. And by the way, it's a society which is going to get worse. I mean, I was watching a report just during the week there about the possible return of Trump to stand for election again, and the attitude of Biden to Trump supporters. So now a Trump supporter, according to Biden, is a neo-fascist, and if you support Trump, you're a neo-fascist. And the truth is, I think Trump is a lunatic. I think he's a political thug. I despise him and everything he stands for. But I know why some people supported him, because he was anti-political. His attitude was, let's drain the swamp. I mean, using a Noam Chomsky term, he borrowed that and bastardized that term. Drain the swamp is what Trump used to call for. Of course, Trump lives in the bloody swamp, so it's ironic that he even talks about draining it. But the difficulty is, so many people in America are now recognising that politics is rotten to the core, absolutely rotten, that the Democrats, the Republicans, is Tweedledum, Tweedledee, they're all in hock to the military-industrial complex. That's who runs America. And therefore, when I hear people talk about America's here and America's there and America's calling for that, I immediately worry, because if America's calling for anything, then we've got to be absolutely concerned about it. I mean, you and I have had discussions in the past about the whole situation in Ukraine, and how we're all, similar to our earlier discussion about this forced mourning situation, we're also supposed to be forced to be anti-Russian. All of us must be anti-Russian. All of us must be pro-Ukrainian. Why? Because the Western media's told us that. That's their narrative. That's the line they're pushing. And then there's a fly in the ointment, because you and me come out and say, well, wait a minute, the war never started 200 days ago. The war started in 2014 when there was a military coup organised by America to overthrow an elected government in Ukraine that was closer to Russia. And that new regime that was installed had links with the neo-fascists, had neo-fascists involved in their army, and they then started to attack the Donbass region and have done for 8 years and bombarded people and killed people. Nobody heard about it, nobody bothered about it. And then when they amassed a massive group of forces in the Donbass, Putin decided, listen, we're going to have to move in here because if we don't, there could be an invasion of the whole Donbass area, and the 200-day war started. You and I say that we're pro-Russian. We're in the hands of. But the Pope said it. Go and look at what even the Pope had the courage to say, that NATO is responsible for what happened. Yep. NATO has poked the bear far too often. If someone is outside your door barking constantly, inevitably there will be a reaction. Now, that's been off the face of commentary, of course. You don't see that getting talked about that much. Why? Because they can't slag the Pope. They can't turn around and say that he's biased, that he's a mad left-winger and that he's in the pay of Putin. But he's talking truth and sense. And we've got to be, in my opinion, as people with any sort of platform at all, we've got to ask people, don't believe the hype. Look beneath the story. Look for the real story, which is always to do with what is in the interest of America and big business. That's what it's all about in these decisions.
Correct. And Eva, Tommy says, in America, the Republicans and the Democrats, Tweedledee and Tweedledum. Well, we know the Tories aspire to be like the US, but between Labour and Tories, again, we've got our own version of Tweedledee and Tweedledum, do we not?
Yeah, well, we do in a UK-wide context, but I think if you were restricting yourself to, say, a Scottish context for now, I very much agree with Phil's sentiment relative to whether or not the First Minister actually genuinely desires independence. Because when you see the way that she behaves, there's at times very little difference between her tactics and those of the Unionist parties in Scotland. So were she determined to pursue independence, I would have thought she'd have been on the phone to Tommy demanding to be top of the bill speaking at Yesterville next week. She would have a line of SNP MPs and MSPs and councillors who would be marshalling and rallying busloads of folk to come from all over the country to Glasgow to participate. What she would not be allowing would be a daft wee faction in Aberdeen called the Aberdeen Independence Movement to repeatedly tar people like me and refer to people like me as members of ALBA as being bigoted, when in fact I helped to write some of our equalities policies, and it's the Aberdeen Independence Movement who are the bigots. But she's retaining her independence campaign only for those within the SNP membership that she considers are worthy of participating in the cause and in the struggle. So I have a huge issue with her motivation, the motivation of the leadership of her party, not the grassroots, because the real grassroots of the SNP who's still there genuinely want independence. But they're being let down on a daily basis by a leadership who are taken with the trappings of power. Tommy spoke very eloquently there about what's happening in America, but there are developments in America which have had an impact here, especially and most controversially perhaps in relation to gender reform and various financial issues that affect the health agenda, not the least of which is the ongoing issue regarding abortion and some of the awful developments that there were in America that have been mirrored here with people shouting outside abortion clinics, and it's taken the feminists to our fingertips far too long to ensure the safety and protection of women. So these are all American things that have arrived here, and that kind of stuff's only going to get worse when we're, in inverted commas, led by a First Minister who doesn't have the cojones of Michelle O'Neill and Mary Lou MacDonald and isn't able to say to Truss, look, Hen, I'm telling you, this is the way it's going to be. And that's what Scotland's needing now. We're not needing somebody with a begging bowl and a wee epistle to Liz Truss. I'd have had more respect for Miss Sturgeon if she'd made it a request for a Section 30 at the very least, and a reminder as to why that should have been granted. As it is, she's shot that, folks, by application, the Lord Advocate's application to the Supreme Court, which obviously we covered earlier. So things are not good in Scotland politically just now, and the hope that's on the horizon is Yesterville and the activists like Tommy, Phil, myself, you, Roddy, who'll all be there, be there in the square, make Scotland's voice heard, because we're the folk that are going to have to do it, because those who are elected so to do are letting us down at every turn.
Yeah, Phil, obviously I agree with all the sentiments expressed here, but I go back to the one about there's no change. I mean, our new Prime Minister has said under no circumstances does she believe in a referendum for Scotland. It's just wrong. She's another great monarchist as well. But here's a wee clip, because I don't know if a lot of our viewers know, our Liz started off life as a Liberal.
Yes.
And here's a wee clip of her talking, I don't know if the first one up, Techie, which is if it's about the royal family or if it's about referendums. Can you play them for me?
Don't mind. The next speaker is Elizabeth Truss from Oxford West and Abingdon and President of the Oxford University Liberal Democrats. And would Norman Baker stand by, please? Elizabeth.
There are two main problems with this amendment conference. It does not give us a Dutch bicycling monarchy. In fact, the amendment does not change the position of the monarch at all. It does not allow women to succeed the same as it allows men to succeed. It will not abolish any of the current constitutional powers that the monarch has. And moreover, this amendment does not give the people of Britain a say. It gives them no chance to vote on a referendum. I agree with Paddy Ashdown when he said, everybody in Britain should have the chance to be a somebody. But only one family can provide the head of state. We Liberal Democrats believe in opportunity for all. We believe in fairness and common sense. We believe in referenda on major constitutional issues. We do not believe that people should be born to rule, or that they should put up and shut up about decisions that affect their everyday lives. Do you, conference, believe that? Do you?
Referenda are so important for constitutional matters and should be used at every opportunity. And now she's got an opportunity as Prime Minister and she's going, no, you're not getting one.
Yeah.
I mean, worried about the outcome.
Yeah, there's a couple of sides to this. The first thing is there's the classic adage that when the situation changes, so does my opinion, and yours, sir, or madam. And so there is that the situation can change. But what's clear here is that she started out having principles and getting into politics as a journalist, as most people who go into the profession do. They go in there trying to hope to do something good for the right. I'll give most people the benefit of the doubt. But very, very quickly, you realise that if you want to get on, you've got to play the game. And she will do exactly as she is told. She's there at the behest of those who are really in power, just as Johnson was. She'll finish Brexit. Some of the crap she's coming out with, completely opposite of what she started out in politics as an anti-monarchist. And, she said she'll get rid of the monarchy, and now she's kowtowing and will go along with it. And she met King Charles the Third. And is going along with everything that she said she was up against. And then referenda's the way to go. Nah, you just can't believe her. She's got no credibility. We've spoken about her before. She is a bad actor.
About power and absolute power, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it corrupts absolutely. Yeah, it does. It does, and it's not just this. What saddens me and sickens me is that there's a balance to be struck here, and this is where I'm looking at let's see what happens. I don't want to comment, but let's see. I know Tommy's invited, and the organisers invited everybody to the 18th. This is about our country. Yeah, and so let's see who takes it up and who doesn't. Right? I'll leave that to whenever the results say. But no, Tommy, if you want to step in, mate.
Yeah, I think from my point of view, Phil, the whole issue of next Sunday is if there are a few hundred of us assembled in the square calling for the SNP to do more to deliver our independence, sadly it'll fall on deaf ears.
Yeah.
Sadly it'll fall on deaf ears because the SNP leadership in particular, they listen now to those who they think will have a role in determining whether they stay in power. whether they retain the trinkets of electoral success. You and I and others know the difference between going to Westminster to settle up and going to Westminster to settle down. And sadly, far too many SNP MPs are there settling down instead of settling up.
Yep.
If there are thousands in George Square next Sunday, the SNP will begin to feel the hot breath of the electorate on its neck. And that's when the 19th October date, in my opinion, becomes the property of the independence movement instead of a statement of intent without perhaps the strength of intention behind it in relation to 19th October. The SNP have made the day. I think they've done that because of the pressure from below. The pressure from below was you must do something. You've won 5 elections since 2014. You've been dragged out against your democratic will from European Union in 2016. Things have moved on since 2014. You have stood in every election as the de facto party of independence and won every one of them. So what do you do? So they felt they needed to do something because everybody was saying nothing's changing, there's no proposals coming forward. So they introduced the 19th October date and the referendum bill. It's there, it's in Parliament, it's been introduced. It will stay that way. It will go into a cupboard if there's only a few hundred of us in the square next Sunday. If there are thousands of us in the square next Sunday, that will become the property of us and we can drive it forward. Instead of seeking permission, we make a statement of intent. We don't care what you lot say down in Westminster. We are holding the referendum, and if the unionists want to, discussed this before, if they want to boycott it, let them boycott it. As long as we go over 50% of the population of Scotland to take part in it, then that result becomes the result you go to the United Nations with and say, we want you to recognise our independence. Give us something to take to these people across the world, because England as a country, England as a nation is not very well thought of across the planet. Lots of countries will look at any opportunity to break up that imperialist union and they'll support it. But we need something in black and white, and that's why I think we need the vote.
Mm-hmm. Well said, Tommy. Eva, because, Mona, we've talked here over several weeks about the energy crisis coming, the poverty, the hunger, the premature deaths from hypothermia, etc. We've done all that. Other reasons, as if we needed more reasons, but our new Prime Minister, again, has also said, you know, that if you remember back to 2014, which we all do, and Ian Wood in particular, and the BBC, telling us how shit our oil was, how it was running out 5 years, I think was it 5 or 10 years, Alistair Darling said it would be gone, there would be no more left. And Liz Truss has said, you know, the answer to the present economic problems of the UK is to extract more oil. She's going to issue 100 licences immediately, because that's going to save one. The other one, we know that in Scotland, we produce not only enough through renewables to look after every house in Scotland, we export the excess, and that doesn't even include that we've got twice the amount of gas, or 3 times the amount of gas that we need to run any gas-fired, 5 times, thank you, Phil, of our power stations. We've got hydropower. We've got the oil that can run everything, and yet, Liz Truss wants Scotland to build a couple of nuclear power stations, so as, you know, take the nuclear power up in Scotland, but send the electricity down to Scotland, and we'll still charge you more for your electricity. We need to get out, and Tommy's right, we need thousands in the square. We need a mobilisation of the people before there's nothing left of Scotland to save.
Well, what this is, yet again, as we all know, is Scotland bankrolling Westminster, bankrolling the Union, paying for all the stuff that, you know, we've always paid for and got hardly anything back. You know, remember the 80s and Thatcher's robbery of Scotland and, you know, everything that she sold off, and all the great plans that there were in the 80s and the 90s and since then in relation to infrastructure developments in England, the expansion of London, everything's London-centric and the money's spent down there as opposed to anywhere else. But, you know, we used to be accused in the independence movement of not understanding that Scotland was too wee and too poor and too stupid. Well, we know we're not too wee, and we're certainly not too poor, because we know we pay far more into the Westminster Exchequer than we get back out again. We know that Scotland is going to be, you know, funding and resourcing the rest of the UK, both in the context of oil and gas, wind, wave, you know, all the different exports that there are from here. And if we allow that to continue, though, it's not that we're going to be too wee or too poor. We are clearly too stupid if we don't grab this opportunity with both hands and run with it. You know, as Tommy says, that date was probably announced by the First Minister because she was under a lot of pressure. It's not necessarily a date that she has very much confidence in herself yet, but she should get a strong message next Sunday when thousands of people do turn up and demand that that is the date when Scotland does get the opportunity to vote. But what she can do between now and October next year is this. She can fulfil her promise made in January 2020 to convene a constitutional convention.
Yep.
Promised it 2.5 years ago. There is now no reason for her not to deliver that. It was a promise that I hope was made in good faith, and there is no reason for it now not to be carried through. She could have that convention of all elected MPs, MSPs, councillors from all parties and none who were elected on a ticket of independence, and those politicians can meet every Friday in Edinburgh from now until October next year and figure out exactly how we're going to achieve our independence and you know what the process is, and really listen to the voices of the people who are the majority in the country who want the chance to go for it. If she doesn't do that, then all she's doing, yet again, is damaging her own credibility and causing members of her own party, as well as within the wider movement, to question whether the SNP will continue to settle down as opposed to settle up. You know, Winnie Ewing said about, you know, stop the world, Scotland wants to go on. Those words have never been more true than they are today. And again, you know, the shiver that ran round Westminster looking for a spine to run up, well, that shiver's been back in Holyrood, and it's still tearing round the Palace of Holyrood, as well as the Parliament in Holyrood, looking for a spine. It has to be provided, and it's time to step up to the mark, Nicola. Too much has been wasted, and too many lives have been ruined by inaction, and we just cannot watch Scotland continue in this awful downward spiral when there is so much that should be going for us. You know, the potential of this country, if Scotland is actually bankrolling Westminster, which we know we are, think what Scotland would be like as an independent nation. You know, instead of saying we can't do this, look at what we could do. We would be able to eradicate poverty. We would be able to close every food bank practically overnight. We'd be able to pay every citizen a universal basic income. We could solve the problems in the NHS. We could pay our bin men decent wages without having unnecessary, unwelcome strikes, because all they were looking for was a decent pay. You know, my nephew, Tommy, you've met him, Kieran McGinty, he's a bin man. He's a young lad in his mid-20s. He's a bin man with Carmarthenshire Council. He couldn't even get decent boots for the council. He buys bits, you know, a bin boy, really. So he was out on strike. He had my full, total, complete support. But the fact that these men who do that horrible work had to go out and strike in the first place is an absolute disgrace. That kind of stuff would be gone if Scotland were independent. You wouldn't have nurses using food banks. You know, it's no secret I've been in hospital multiple times. I've met a lot of really hard-working people in the NHS. I owe my life to them. I owe my mobility to them. But a lot of these folk are, you know, they're living on the breadline. You meet them at the checkout in Tesco's, and they're the people that are putting stuff back. And then they're embarrassed to go to food banks and to seek charity handouts. Why has there been an explosion in the number of second-hand shops and betting shops that you see in all our town centres? It's because people need second-hand shops, they need charity shops, and they go to the bookies because they need to have a bit of hope that they're going to suddenly have a windfall to escape all of this. I think when I was at the George Square event a couple of weeks ago in relation to recovery, one of the really poignant things that was said was that this winter for a lot of people who can't turn on the electricity or the gas, where they're going to get their heat from, and they really didn't mean heat, they meant escapism from, was going to be a handful of street Valium, because that was cheaper and more affordable at 20 pence a tablet than it was to turn on the gas or the electricity. That is what Scotland is reduced to, in every town and every city in this country. And it is so unnecessary. And for all of that suffering and all of that want, I absolutely and completely lay the blame for that at the door of the Scottish Government. It shouldn't be happening. And it's long overdue that these issues were addressed openly and honestly, without messing about and blaming other people. The SNP government were given the tools to do the job, get it done.
Well said, yeah. I wanted to scream there because you're right. It reminds me. And this show, Tommy, we go on all the time. We show what we're worried about. We worry about the people being hungry, going without, people dying prematurely, all those things. We care. I want to play a clip for you particularly, Tommy. This is a Tory, Lord Spencer. And here's his priority. Here's what he thinks we need to do to make society better. Techie, can you put up that clip, please, of Lord Spencer?
The last couple of minutes together, there are benefits to be had from Brexit, are there, Lord Spencer?
Yes, many.
Outline some that we need to explore.
Well,
now.
Why don't, for example, financial services? There are loads, you don't want me to bore you with techie, of European regulation that have been lumbered on financial services, which should be peeled off. And one of them, which again will of course not poll well, is would you take away the cap on bankers' bonuses? I mean, that was all a European project.
Does that not? That makes me want to vomit and scream with anger, Tommy.
Of course it does, Roddy. Any person with a single brain cell has to surely want to scream with rage when they listen to this guy talk. Let's be clear about it. The sales of Lamborghinis, the sales of Moët champagne, the luxury yachts, they're going through the roof. They've never had it so good. Luxury goods are absolutely in demand. Why? Because there have never been more billionaires and millionaires across the UK in any time in recorded history. So when we're talking about those assholes at the top using Swiss banks for their wealth, we have to remind ourselves that nurses and bin workers are using food banks. Swiss banks for them, food banks for us. That's what the UK is all about. That's what we have to challenge. That's what we have to stand up and say no to. And it really, really irks me, Roddy, that we don't have the anger, we don't have the rage, we don't have the passion from our SNP representatives down in Westminster, who should be walking out every single day. They never even joined Kenny and Neil when they walked out in protest a couple of weeks ago. We shouldn't be doing there to make it work. We should be doing there to make it a mess, to make it a disaster, to be expelled every single day of the week. Because at the end of the day, and Phil touched on it earlier, at the end of the day, Roddy, we're getting to the stage, in my opinion, and we'll need to see what happens, but in my opinion, the next general election for anybody that believes in independence should be fought on an abstentionist policy. Vote us in to get us out. We don't go down there to take up the travails of being an MP. We don't go down to the most exclusive club in the world. You vote us in to set up the first Scottish Convention of Independence, and we bring together, as Eva said earlier, all of those who have been voted in on an independence platform. We set up the beginnings of our new Scotland. That's what we have to do, our new Scotland. That needs a constitution, it needs a set of rules, it needs to put fairness and compassion at the very forefront of it. But that's the way I think we're going, Roddy. I'll watch that and I just want to puke, mate. I'm just so furious with these people that they're a disgrace to society.
Absolutely. Look, time is beating us as always, but there's one other topic I must go through and a wee chat with you at the end before we go. And it's this, Eva. We have complained over months and months, we need the SNP to do more. we slag the Tories and all the unionists every chance we get, especially the Tories. Now, I'm going to talk up a Tory here, and I hope you'll all forgive me. And that is, I've got a name, Suella Braverman, who's the new Home Secretary for Liz Truss. And she's come out and said that she will strike down the GRA reform bill because it would have effects across the rest of the UK, so she's not going to let it stand. From one side of me says, how dare you? How dare you, our elected representative? Well, I don't agree with that GRA reform bill. I oppose it with every corpuscle in my body, but it's the settled will of an elected democratic government. They've got no right to do it, but they will do it. They can do it, and they will do it. Will that be the trigger for the SNP to decide they want independence and they want to get campaigning hard? Could that be, I don't know what you'd call it, a double-edged sword?
Roddy, I think that gender reform and matters affecting women have been very badly managed by the First Minister and by those around her. Anecdotally, I suppose one aspect of this that also developed this week was that the man who was going to be employed in the Tayside Angus area as the period products advisor or whatever the heck his title was, he's now not obviously in the job. I think he's in effect, he's kind of been dismissed before he started because he was on holiday and never actually got into the job. The job itself has now been extinguished, and the panel of 4 women who employed the man in the first place look like they're now going to be sued by him on the basis of sex discrimination. I mean, you couldn't make it up if you tried. So I think that it's really sticks in the craw of me as a Scottish woman who voted SNP, didn't realise how intent they were on self-ID, but obviously independence-minded, to see that my rights are likely to be safeguarded and maintained by a unionist Tory absolutely defies belief. No, I don't think that Nicola Sturgeon will get the message. I think she'll whine and moan about how it's no fair, they shouldn't be doing this, when actually people like me predicted a long time ago that because the Equality Act is Westminster legislation and because the original Gender Reform Act is also Westminster legislation, there was every possibility of a development of this nature happening, but that objection was really just completely ignored by those of the leadership of the SNP, determined to drive through a very unfortunate piece of legislation, if we put it that way, that most people, when they understand what it involves, are against. It's the self-ID aspect that people don't like, and they don't understand what it means at first until it's properly explained to them. Will it lead to Nicola seeking independence with all due urgency? No. The only thing that's going to do that is when she is forced to listen to the majority of the people of Scotland who are, as Tommy says, getting angry because we think we've been sold a dud with all these mandates that we've provided the Scottish Government over and over and over again. So, Nicola, if you're watching this, as you, I would get the finger out sooner rather than later, because if Suella Braverman doesn't see you off, the people of Scotland will. Your jacket is on a very shaky nail now.
Good. Well, we'll come towards the end, but I just want to do one more plug, if I may, Phil. This time next week, my friend, I haven't seen you for several months now. We will be in the city of Glasgow, the wonderful city of Glasgow. We will be, ladies and gentlemen, we will be 10 o'clock in the morning on Sunday, anyone about, want to get in early for the festival. We will be recording this show, this format, on the day in George Square. And Tommy, you'll pop in and say hello, won't you?
Definitely.
You bringing the bacon sandwiches?
Well, do you know, that's an interesting point. I was thinking maybe some wee yum-yums for Greg's just across the square. They sell a wee pack of yum-yums, 2 in a box. I could bring 4 of them and have a nice wee coffee. The whole point is, obviously one thing we can't legislate for is the weather, but as I'm sitting here, I'm looking outside, it's bright, the sun is out. We've always... Only one out of the 8 demos and rallies that we've had in the square I think there's only one that the weather was inclement. So it's been dry. Some of the days have actually been warm enough that you're walking about in your T-shirts. There'll be new T-shirts as well, new design T-shirts with the thistle, calling for the 19th October movement to be taken up by everyone. And again, Roddy, you've been there. They are all about fun. They are about coming together with people of a like mind in a determined fashion to restate our belief that our dream will never die, that we want to be free once again. And I think we need that. I really do, because we've had all these years of the COVID, it stopped us meeting together, it stopped us coming together. Well, let's come together on Sunday and let's say loud and clear, we will not be deterred by the machinations of Westminster or any unelected judge or unrepresentative Tory. We are going to have our referendum.
We are indeed, and we're going to have our show there next week, Phil. And we'll maybe run on a wee bit and speak to somebody if you've got questions you want to ask any of the panel. And you'll come in, you'll be there, Eva, because you're going to be in George Square anyway. And Yvonne will be there.
Could I have a wee plug here, actually, Roddy? We're going to have two stalls in the square on behalf of the Alba Equalities team. So I'm hoping that as many members of my team can be there as possible, because when I became the Equalities convener, I was very, very determined that we would have a group of people who had professional and life experience of all equality-related issues. So one of the members of the team is actually Tommy's sister, Lynn, who's been a real great support to me. Lita from Sky's coming. There's various others from right around the country will be there, and we're going to have representatives too from African Scots for Alba, Scots Asians for Alba, the Gypsy Traveller community, from the recovery community, and we'll have literature that's not simply party political on behalf of Alba, but is to do with equality-related matters, including, obviously, addiction, recovery, and a whole host of issues. So I think that there'll be a lot for people to take in from our two stalls, and I'm really hoping that we're visited by as many interested parties as possible. Thank you.
So you can come, be entertained, you'll hear the music, you'll hear the speeches, you can see the Prism, you can come and say hello. Step in, come in, tell us, say hello and tell us who you are. But make sure you're there. Tommy's right, we've got to get thousands in the square. If you really, a wee bit of rain is getting your hair wet, worth seeing Scotland independent. If the boys are willing to give up their fame and their fortune, the proclaimers for everything, you can get your hair wet. The bottom of your trousers wet, the bottom of your skirt wet.
Last time I checked, my skin was waterproof, and the reality is down to us. We've got to put our own house in order first. See all this nonsense you get with the GRA and all this stuff about putting the world in order. Put your own house in order, and it's up to us. So be there in the square or be square.
There you go. Okay, lady, gentlemen, thank you very much for your time today and your input. It was always wonderful. It makes me feel better, and I know it makes a lot of our viewers feel better. And want to get another wee plug. Yvonne, have a nice wedding, and best of congratulations to your daughter, and it all goes well. And we will literally see you all next week. And until then, please take care.
All the best.
Hi, it's Charlie Craig, where the Proclaimers were urging everybody to get along to Festival in George Square on the 18th of September and encourage and move us forward in our fight for independence.
Then we beg
No, I can't understand why we let someone else rule our land.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.